They called it the rain that killed. During World War II, storms didn't just wash away trenches, they swallowed entire armies. Men froze in waist-deep sludge. Canvas tents sagged, rifles rusted, maps dissolved, and boots filled with mud so heavy that walking felt like dragging the earth itself. But somewhere out there, amid the chaos and thunder, a handful of soldiers did something unthinkable. While others drowned in the mud, they stayed dry, warm, and invisible. Not because of better gear, but because of a forgotten field method that turned dirt, ash, and wax into armour against the sky. This wasn't a factory innovation. No patents, no blueprints, no fancy equipment. It was survival engineering, discovered in the middle of hell. And it worked so well that post-war engineers couldn't believe it hadn't been standard issue. They called it the sealed earth method, a natural, self-healing, waterproof roof built from the ground itself. Every army in World War II fought two wars, one against the enemy and one against the elements. Mud was a merciless foe. The French trenches in the west, the Russian plains in the east, even the Italian mountains, all turned into liquid death when it rained. Canvas and tarps, the standard protection of the time, failed miserably. They tore under their own soaked weight. Seams split. Once water got in, the chill followed. Wet fabric clung to the skin, uniforms rotted, and morale collapsed with the shelters. But where most soldiers cursed the rain, a few paid attention to how the ground responded. Military engineers noticed something fascinating. The ovens and makeshift kilns they built from clay and ash stayed bone dry inside, even in downpours. The material wasn't fighting water. It was adapting to it. The outer clay would swell and seal itself when wet, then harden again when the sun returned. What started as an accident of field cooking soon turned into a quiet revolution in battlefield shelter design. The genius of the sealed earth method lay in its simplicity. Soldiers didn't need supplies or chemicals, only clay, ash, fabric, and determination. They began by bending green branches, usually willow or hazel, into a low arch, strong but flexible enough to form a natural curve. Over that, they spread a thick layer of wet clay mixed with fine wood ash. Why ash? Because it did more than just bulk up the clay. Ash absorbed excess moisture as the clay dried, tightening it into a dense, water-resistant skin. It also added a touch of fire resistance, a big bonus when your roof sits inches above your field stove. Next came the heart of the method, a layer of fabric brushed with melted wax or animal fat. This could be anything from an old tent flap to spare uniforms sewn together. Once the wax soaked through, it formed a flexible, hydrophobic shield that shrugged off water like a duck's back. Over that layer, soldiers added a final coat of clay, mixed with straw and soil, blending the shelter into the ground so well that from a distance it looked like nothing more than a mound of dirt. The result? A self-insulating, waterproof bunker built entirely by hand. The beauty of the design was how naturally it cooperated with the environment. Instead of fighting moisture, it redirected it. The outer clay layer absorbed rain and spread it evenly, preventing pooling. The waxed fabric underneath stopped the water from passing through. The small air gap trapped between the layers acted as insulation, keeping warmth inside and cold outside. And when damaged, the shelter practically repaired itself. The next rainfall swelled the clay again, resealing cracks, what modern engineers would now call a self-healing structure. This made the shelters nearly indestructible during long campaigns. Soldiers reported sitting dry and warm through days of relentless rain, while nearby units drowned in leaking tarps and collapsing trenches. British and German engineers tested the concept after the war and found that these clay and wax bunkers could endure 4 days of continuous rain without a single leak. 4 days. No pumps, no plastic, no maintenance. Just physics, clay, and ingenuity. What those soldiers discovered unknowingly was a principle now recognized in sustainable architecture: hydrodynamic layering. It's the art of combining materials that absorb water, called hydrophilic, with those that repel it, known as hydrophobic, to create a structure that manages moisture rather than just resisting it. Think about that. In the middle of the bloodiest conflict in modern history, without any formal training or resources, frontline engineers stumbled upon a principle that would become central to eco-building decades later. They built with what nature offered. And, well, nature rewarded them. Clay absorbed shock and moisture. Wax repelled water. Soil insulated and disguised. The system wasn't just practical. Honestly, it was brilliant in its cooperation with natural forces. There's something poetic about it. Amid destruction, these men created something sustainable. They weren't thinking about green design or zero waste. They were simply thinking about staying alive. Yet, in doing so, they tapped into the same science now used in passive houses and earth-based architecture. And the shelters didn't just survive the war. Many of them still exist today, their shapes intact, still shedding water like they did 8 decades ago. The materials may have aged, but the method remains timeless. This wasn't luck. It was understanding, a kind of primal intelligence about how earth, air, and water interact. Those soldiers knew what modern engineers now spend years modelling in software, that real resilience comes from cooperation, not resistance. The sealed earth method isn't lost to time. If you ever find yourself off-grid in the wilderness or building a sustainable shelter, you can use the same approach, and it still works flawlessly. Start with a strong frame of green branches bent into an arch. Mix 4 parts clay with 1 part fine ash. Spread it as your base, let it stiffen a little, then add a wax-saturated fabric layer. Beeswax, candle wax or animal fat all work. Finally, top it off with another coat of clay mixed with straw or dry grass. Once it dries, you've got a breathable, waterproof roof that can endure storms for months. It's warm in winter, cool in summer, and, well, it requires 0 plastic or chemicals. These days, modern homesteaders and survivalists have brought it back for things like root cellars, outdoor ovens, and even small cabins. The principle really hasn't changed: redirect water outward, trap warmth inside, and just let nature do the rest. You know, it's easy to forget that the world's most efficient solutions often come from moments of desperation. Those soldiers didn't have blueprints. They had intuition. They understood that the materials around them weren't obstacles, but allies. When rain turned the world into mud, they built comfort from that very mud. When everything collapsed around them, they made something that endured. So, the next time you see an old photograph of smiling soldiers inside a dry dugout while rain floods the trenches outside, just know that it wasn't just luck or better leadership. It was knowledge. Knowledge of how to listen to the earth and turn it into a shield. This is the kind of history we love exploring here on the Forgotten War Fronts, where innovation meets survival and the smallest human discoveries echo through time. If you want more stories like this, about forgotten field hacks, lost ingenuity, and the science that kept soldiers alive, subscribe, share, and keep learning. Because sometimes the greatest lessons from World War II aren't written in textbooks. They're buried in the mud, waiting to be rediscovered.